5 years ago, Kim Taehyung was a nobody. He had no money, no fame, and no idea if the endless 16-hour practice days in a cold damp basement would ever pay off. His days smelled of old sweat and cheap floor wax, and his nights were fueled by cheap instant noodles and a desperate prayer that someone somewhere would notice him. The only warm light in his hard life was Jungkook. He was an art student with kind eyes and a warm smile. Every single night, no matter how exhausted he was from his own long classes and heavy books, he traveled all the way across Seoul just to bring him a thermos of warm food. When Taehyung sat on the floor of his tiny dorm room, crying out of sheer frustration after another failed test at his agency, Jungkook was the one who pulled him up. He dragged him outside to the quiet banks of the Han River and made him look at the glittering city lights. You won't be a trainee forever, he told him, his voice full of absolute faith. One day millions of people are going to know your name. Taeyong let out a wet, tired laugh. He reached out and linked his pinky river with his. If that happens, I will buy you the biggest house in Seoul, right here by the water. Promise? He asked softly. Promise, he said. It was a happy, innocent promise, but dark clouds were gathering over their future. One rainy evening, while Jungkook was studying late at the campus library, his phone rang. It was a hospital. Taeyoung's younger sister Sumin had suddenly collapsed at school. The doctors delivered a terrifying diagnosis. Sumin's liver was failing rapidly. Without a major organ transplant, within a matter of days, she would not survive. Jungkook did not stop to think about herself. He quietly went to the hospital the very next morning to see if his blood type and tissue matched. He was a perfect match. Before he could even schedule the surgery date, a heavy summons arrived. The powerful, ruthless CEO of Taehyung Agency, Chairman Kwon, called Jungkook to his luxurious office. He slid a folder across his glass desk. Inside were photographs of his and Taehyung, laughing together on the street. If the public finds out our trainee has a dying family member and a boyfriend undergoing major surgery, the investors will panic. The CEO warned him. His voice like ice. His big debut will be cancelled before it even begins. Jungkook shook, clutching his bag. I will keep it a secret. No one will ever know. This is not enough, the CEO said, leaning forward. If you truly love him, leave him. No phone calls, no text messages, no explanations. Make him believe you betrayed him and found someone better. If you don't do this, you will destroy his life work with your own hands. 2 weeks later, recovering in a terrible pain from the major surgery that saved Sumin's life, Jungkook forced himself to walk down to the Han River. Taehyung came running toward him. His face was glowing and his eyes were full of tears of joy. They approved my debut. The company finally said yes. We did it, Jungkook. Jungkook's heart tore right down the middle. He wanted nothing more than to throw his arms around his neck, bury his face in his shoulder, and tell him the truth. But he thought of Somin. He thought of CEO's threats. Instead, he forced his face to turn hard and cold. There is no us anymore, he said, his voice completely flat. Taeyong stopped dead in his tracks. The bright smile melted off his face. What? What do you mean? I met someone else. He lied, his chest burning as if he had swallowed fire. He has money. He has a real future. I got tired of waiting around for a boy who might never become anything. Taeyong stared at him, his eyes wide with horror and disbelief. He searched his face for any sign that he was joking, that it was a prank, that he loved him. He found nothing. His eyes were completely dead. With shaking fingers, Taehyung reached down and pulled off the cheap silver ring they had bought together on a street market date. He dropped it hard into his trembling palm. I hope he is worth it, he whispered, his voice cracking. Without looking back, he turned and walked away into the heavy cold rain. As soon as his figure disappeared into the grey mist, Jungkook's legs gave out. He fell hard to his knees on the wet concrete, clutching the silver ring to his chest, and let out a broken, agonizing cry that was completely drowned out by the storm. He had saved his sister, he had protected his dream, and to do it, he had turned himself into the villain in the story of a man he loved most in the world. 3 months later, the debut showcase hall roared with deafening screams. Bright, blinding stage lights swept across the packed arena, while hundreds of fans chanted the name of the new rookie group, standing just behind the heavy black curtain. Kim Taeyong closed his eyes and tried to steady his breathing. This was the exact moment he had sacrificed his youth for. The stage manager raised his hand and began counting down. 10 seconds. Taeyong's hands shook. Without thinking, his fingers slipped into his jacket pocket and brushed against a small cold piece of metal. It was a silver ring, the magic band Jungkook had handed back to him on the rainy day. He shattered his whole world. Over the past 3 months, he had tried to throw it away into the Han River more times than he could count. But every single time, right before he let go, his hand froze and he pulled it back. 5 seconds, the manager whispered proudly, clapping him on the shoulder. Taeyong, this is your beginning. Taehyung gave a stiff nod, slipped the ring back into his pocket, and stepped out onto the blazing stage. The crowd erupted into a wall of sound. Cameras flashed continuously, capturing his sharp choreography, his stable vocals, and the haunted, intense expression in his eyes. That night, millions watched his debut online. News outlets praised his natural charisma, calling him the group's standout star. Everyone celebrated his massive success. Everyone except Taehyung. Meanwhile, miles away on the other side of Seoul, Jungkook sat alone in a quiet, sterile hospital room. A thick, tight medical bandage was wrapped securely around his abdomen, hiding the jagged scar from his surgery. Every time he shifted or took a deep breath, a sharp ache flared through his side. On the small wall mounted television, Taehyung's debut showcase broadcasted live. He was smiling for the cameras, the exact same bright smile he had spent years protecting. Tears spilled over his lower eyelids, rolling silently down her pale cheeks. You did it, he whispered to the glowing screen, his voice trembling in the empty room. I am so proud of you. The door clicked open and a night nurse stepped in, frowning. When she saw his face, you should not be straining yourself by watching television. Dr. Jungkook, your stitches could reopen. Jungkook quietly swiped at his cheeks, forcing a weak smile. I am fine. The nurse glanced up at the screen, watching Taehyung hit a high note. Is he someone you know? Jungkook stared at his face for a long, quiet moment before turning his gaze away. No, she whispered, just someone I used to love. As the weeks passed, Taehyung life became a blur of endless schedules, fan meetings, late night music video shoots, radio interviews, and a relentless dance practice from dawn until midnight. He was rising higher than he had ever dreamed. Yet, whenever interviewers asked him about his ideal type or whether he had someone special in his life, his eyes would unconsciously drift away from the cameras, searching the empty space around him as if expecting to find he standing there. His group members began to notice the heavy shadow behind his success. "You don't smile with your eyes anymore," one of them pointed out during a break. Taehyung forced a quick hollow laugh. "I'm just tired." But he was not tired. He was hollowed out. Every single trophy, every loud cheer, and every milestone only reminded him of the boy who had promised to stand beside him when this day finally arrived, only to throw it all away for a wealthier life. One late rainy evening, after a grueling 16-hour practice, Taehyung dismissed his manager and walked home on foot. Without realizing, his feet carried him down the familiar path toward the Han River. The wooden bench was still sitting in the exact same spot. The streetlights flickered against the dark, churning water, mimicking the night he left. He sat down, pulled the silver ring from his pocket, and held it up to the dim light. "What was so wrong with me?" he whispered to the empty wind. "What did I fail to give you?" No answers came back, just the cold river breeze carrying his quiet despair away into the dark. What he did not know, what he could not possibly have known, was that only a few meters away, hidden behind a row of weeping willow trees on the opposite path, a man stood rigidly in the dark holding a black umbrella. Jungkook. He visited this exact bench every year on the anniversary of their breakup. A silent panic for the pain he had caused, seeing him sitting there alone, shoulders slumped in a defeat, tore at his already mended heart. He took a step forward, desperate to run to him, to throw away the lies and tell him the truth. He pressed a hand over his mouth to muffle his sobs. "I'm sorry, Taehyung," he wept silently into the rain. "I still can't come back to you." Just then, his phone buzzed in his coat pocket. The caller ID made all the color drain instantly from his face. Chairman Kivan, with shaking, freezing fingers, he pressed accept. The old man's cold, merciless voice echoed through the speaker. "I warned you 5 years ago, Mr. Jungkook. You have stayed away from him just like we agreed. Keep it that way. Because if Kim Taeyong ever learns the real reason you left, it won't only ruin his career, it will destroy the people he loves most." The line clicked dead. Jungkook stared at the dark, glowing screen in his hand, his entire body trembling violently. What secret was Chairman Kivon still guarding so firmly? And why was he so terrified of Taeyong discovering the truth? Far across the river, Taehyung slowly stood up from the bench, brushing the damp chill from his coat. He had no idea that the man he had never stopped loving had been standing only a few feet away in the shadows. Their paths had crossed again under the same raining sky. But faith and a cruel invisible cage still refused to let them touch. 5 years passed. Kim Tae-young was no longer the struggling trainee shivering in a damp basement dorm. He was a global phenomenon. His albums broke international records. Luxury fashion houses vowed to make him their global ambassador, and stadium tickets vanished into the thin air within seconds of release. To the rest of the world, Kim Tae-young possessed everything a human being could possibly dream of. Yet, every single night when the stadium lights went dark, the deafening cheers faded, and the heavy mahogany door of his luxury penthouse clicked shut behind him, the silence was suffocating. It was a cold, empty expanse that felt lonelier than any poverty he had ever known. His manager often shook his head with an envious chuckle, saying, "You have the whole world in the palm of your hand, Taehyung. What more could you possibly want?" Taehyung would only offer a polite, practiced smile. "If only you knew," he would think, the one thing he had ever truly wanted was only thing that had been ripped away from him 5 years ago. Miles away, in a sleek sunlit high-rise in Gangnam, Jungkook had built an entire separate empire of his own. After pushing through the grueling university architect exams while recovering from major surgery, he threw himself into his work with manic, sleepless dedication. His bold, innovative designs quickly captured the attentions of Korea's most prestigious urban developers. Now, at 29 years old, he was the founder and principal director of his own award winning architecture studio. He had designed breathtaking cultural centers, minimalist luxury hotels, and modern public libraries across the country. Architectural magazine heralded him as the man who turns dreams into buildings, tracing his clean lines and deep empathy for public spaces. To the public, he was a visionary success, but no one knew why he adamantly refused every single press interview that asked about his personal life or why he never attended high society galas. Long after his staff had gone home and the office was bathed in the orange glow of the Seoul street lamps, Jungkook would unlock the bottom drawer of his heavy oak desk. From inside, he would pull out a small, unassuming wooden box. Inside, wrapped meticulously in a piece of clean white cloth, lay a single silver ring. The exact ring Taehyung had handed back to him on the bridge the night he broke his heart. He had never worn another piece of jewelry on his left hand. He had never let another man close to his heart. He lived inside a fortress of his own construction, paying daily penance for a sin he had not wanted to commit. One crisp autumn morning, the heavy glass doors of his office flew open as his young assistant rushed in, waving a thick, cold, embossed envelope. Director Jungkook, you won't believe this. Jungkook did not look up immediately from the blueprint he was sketching. Slow down, Minho. What is it? We just received an official invitation from the Ho Foundation. The assistant said, breathless with excitement. They are organizing Korea's biggest charity gala of the year. A massive project to fund medical care and hospital expansions for underprivileged children. And they want your studio to design the entire event space and lead the commemorative build. Jungkook paused his pencil, looking up with mild interest. The Hope Foundation? That is a wonderful cause. It is an honor to even be considered. Minhu hesitated, suddenly shifting awkwardly from foot to foot. Well, there is one catch. Jungkook raised an eyebrow. A catch? The guest of honor and primary celebrity ambassador for the foundation. Minhu swallowed hard. Is Kim Taehyung. The room went dead silent. The mechanical pencil slipped entirely from Jungkook's fingers, clanking sharply against the polished concrete floor before rolling away into the shadows. His heart gave a violent, painful lurch, sending a sudden spike of heat through his chest, followed by a chilling numbness in his fingertips. 5 years. He had spent 5 years building unbreakable walls around his memories, convincing himself that the past was buried beneath concrete and steel. Yet hearing his name dropped casually into a conversation was enough to shatter every defense he had erected. He slowly bent down, retrieved the fallen pencil, and placed it back on the desk without a word. His hands were shaking. Director Jungkook, Minho asked, looking concerned by his sudden pallor. Should I call and decline? I know you. You usually avoid high profile celebrity events. No, Jungkook interrupted, his voice surprisingly firm, though it carried a fragile edge. He forced his expression back into a mask of professional calm. It is a charity event for children, turning it down because personal reasons would be unprofessional. Accept the commission. Minho blinked in surprise, then smiled. Understood. I will draft the acceptance paper right away. When the door clicked shut, leaving his alone once more, Jungkook slowly lowered his head into his hands. He reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against the cold metal of his capsule of daily medication. You are just a designer working on a project, he whispered fearfully to himself, trying to steady the frantic beating of his heart. You won't even have to see him. It's a big venue. We will pass like ships in the night. He was lying to himself.
Across town, at the sleek headquarters of his entertainment agency, Taehyung was sitting in a leather armchair scrolling through his tablet when his manager dropped a stack of papers and a glossy lifestyle magazine onto the coffee table. Next month's schedule, his manager announced. You are headlining the Hope Foundation charity gala as their main cultural ambassador. Good PR, great cause, and it'll look fantastic ahead of your upcoming album drop. Taehyung didn't look up from his screen. Fine, put it on the calendar. And before you ask, yes, the venue design and architectural layout are being handled by one of the top rising firms in the country, the manager added with an approving nod. The architect leading the build is supposed to be a genius. Won three major international design awards last year. Taehyung let out a flat, disinterested breath. I don't care if Frank Gehry himself designed it. As long as I show up, smile for the cameras, and donate the check, I'm happy. You might actually want to look at the profile before you dismiss it. The manager chuckled, tapping the glossy cover of the magazine sitting on the table. He's kind of a big deal. Taehyung sighed, picking up the magazine just to appease him. His eyes drifted lazily to the cover. And then, his entire world came to a violent, screeching halt. Staring straight back at him from the glossy page was a man standing with quiet, absolute confidence beside a towering, futuristic glass skyscraper. His hair was pulled back neatly, his eyes sharp, intelligent, and carrying a haunting, familiar depth that he would recognize anywhere in the universe. The bold headline across the top screamed Jungkook, the architect who changed Seoul's skyline. Taehyung's fingers locked around the edges of the magazine, bending the thick paper until it creaked. His breath hitched in his throat, and the sterile office around him seemed to dissolve into thin air. Jeon, after 5 years of searching every coffee shop, university bulletin board, and subway station in Seoul, after accepting that he had vanished into the arms of a wealthier life and left him behind like a discarded wrapper, he had suddenly materialized right in front of him. Not as a ghost, not as a painful memory, as a powerhouse, as a peer, as a man standing at the very top of his field. A chaotic storm of emotions erupted inside his chest fury, longing, disbelief, and a burning, agonizing need for answers. For half a decade, he had hated his for abandoning him when he had nothing. Now, looking at his sharp, successful face on the cover of a national magazine, the hatred twisted into something far more dangerous. Taehyung? His manager asked, frowning at his sudden silence. Hey, are you alright? You look like you've seen a ghost. Taehyung slowly lowered the magazine, his jaw clenched so tightly, a muscle ticked in his cheek. The cold, empty void in his chest was gone, replaced by a blazing fire. He didn't care about the charity gala anymore. He didn't care about the cameras, the fans, or the corporate executives. There were only 3 weeks left until the event, and this time, when he found her, he wasn't going to be able to walk away.